You've probably heard it before. A cigar is all wrapper. Or maybe, the cigar is where 80% of the flavor comes from. It's one of the most repeated statements in cigars. And like most cigar myths, there's a little truth buried inside a much bigger misunderstanding. Because yes, wrappers matter. But if wrapper leaf alone determined flavor, then every cigar with a Connecticut wrapper would taste the same. Every Maduro would taste dark and sweet, and blending really wouldn't matter at all. But anyone who's smoked enough cigars knows that's not how this hobby works. Today, we're rethinking one of the biggest half-truths in cigars. The wrapper determines the flavor. To be fair, this myth didn't appear out of nowhere. The wrapper is the first thing your palate experiences. It's the outermost leaf. It touches your lips. It burns directly into the smoke stream. And wrapper leaves often carry concentrated oils, fermentation character, and aroma. So naturally, people notice wrapper differences quickly. The Connecticut shade wrapper can bring creaminess and softness. A Habano wrapper might add spice, while a Maduro can introduce darker sweetness or bitterness depending on fermentation. Those differences are real. But the problem starts when people assume the wrapper is everything. Because cigars aren't built like flavored coatings around neutral filler. They're layered systems. And once you start understanding how binder and filler work together, the wrapper is everything idea starts falling apart pretty fast. If the wrapper is the first impression, the filler is the actual conversation. Most of a cigar's combustion comes from the filler blend. That's where the majority of the tobacco mass exists. That's where strength, body, combustion temperature, texture, and core flavor characteristics are built. Think about how many different leaves are often inside a premium cigar. Ligero, Viso, Seco, different primings, farms, countries, and different fermentation levels. That complexity doesn't disappear because one leaf got wrapped around the outside. A blender can completely change a cigar's profile while keeping the exact same wrapper. And this is where newer smokers sometimes get trapped. They'll say, I only like Maduro cigars, or I only smoke Connecticut. But often, what they're actually reacting to is the overall blend style commonly paired with those wrappers, not the wrapper itself. Because you can absolutely smoke aggressive Connecticut's, mild Maduros, spicy broadleafs, or creamy Habanos. Think about how different the same wrapper can behave between brands. One Connecticut cigar might taste creamy and soft, while another feels peppery, dry, and surprisingly intense. Same general wrapper category, completely different blending philosophy underneath it. That's because the wrapper influences the experience, but the filler blend often defines the personality. And then there's the binder, the leaf people almost never talk about, which is funny because binders can drastically affect combustion, texture, and flavor delivery. A good binder helps regulate burn rate, airflow, smoke density, and structural consistency. Some binders also contribute noticeable earthiness, mineral notes, sweetness, or spice. But because nobody sees the binder, it rarely gets credit. It's kind of the rhythm section of the cigar blend. You may not isolate it easily, but you definitely notice it when it's bad. And this is one of the reasons cigar blending is difficult. You're not just stacking flavors, you're balancing combustion behavior. A wrapper that tastes amazing on one blend may taste harsh or muted on another, Because the filler combustion changes how the wrapper performs. Everything interacts. You'll constantly hear percentages thrown around. The wrapper is 60%. Maybe it's 70%. Or the wrapper is 80% up the flavor. But cigar flavor isn't measured like audio sliders. There's no machine calculating, ah yes, this cocoa note came specifically from the wrapper. Flavor perception changes based on combustion temperature, smoke concentration, humidity, draw resistance, retrohale sensitivity, nicotine perception, fermentation, and pacing. And here's the bigger issue. The wrapper becomes more noticeable in thinner cigars. On a lancero, the wrapper to filler ratio is much higher. On a thick ring gauge cigar, the filler dominates more heavily. That's why a lancero often feels more wrapper forward, while a 60 ring gauge cigar can sometimes mute wrapper nuance under so much filler blend. So even the wrapper's impact changes depending on the vitola. That alone makes blanket percentages pretty unreliable. Part of the reason this myth survives is because wrappers are easy to market. They're visible, easy to categorize, and they give smokers simple shortcuts in a hobby that's actually very complex. It's much easier to say, I smoke Maduros, than to explain fermentation methods, primings, combustion characteristics, or blending philosophy. And wrapper color alone tells you far less than people think. Some dark cigars are incredibly smooth and approachable, while some lighter wrappers can carry surprising spice or intensity. That's why judging cigars purely by wrapper appearance can become limiting over time. Eventually, you realize you're not just smoking a wrapper leaf. You're smoking a complete system designed by a blender. Instead of asking, how much flavor comes from the wrapper, a better question is, what role is the wrapper playing in this blend? Sometimes it's the star, sometimes it's support, and sometimes it's just smoothing edges or adding aroma. Great cigars are usually about harmony, not domination. The best blenders understand restraint. They know when a wrapper should amplify the filler and when it should stay out of the way. And honestly, this is one of the most rewarding shifts in the hobby. Once you stop judging cigars purely by wrapper color or wrapper type, you start noticing blending intention. You stop saying, I don't smoke Ecuadorian Connecticut, and start saying, I like how this blender used Ecuadorian Connecticut here. That's a completely different level of appreciation. The wrapper matters a lot, but cigars are ecosystems, not single ingredients. The wrapper may shape the introduction, but their binder and filler often determine where the experience actually goes. A cigar blend is more like a recipe than a paint job, and once you understand that, you stop chasing wrappers and start understanding blends. If you enjoyed this episode of Rethinking Cigars, I appreciate you spending part of your day here with me. The conversation in this series have been some of my most favorite we've had on the channel lately, especially from people willing to challenge old assumptions and actually think deeper about the hobby. And honestly, that's the entire point of this series. Not to tell people they're smoking cigars wrong, just to slow down and rethink some of the things we've all heard be repeated for years.